Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the owner and operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events. And I am so happy to be bringing you this podcast in which we delve deep into the subgenres and the micro genres and everything else that goes with the horror genre, as well as different decades of the entire spectrum of the filmography of horror in order to allow you, the audience, to get a small glimpse into some of the films that you may have seen, may have never seen or heard of, or you're watching or want to watch them again for another time. I'm hoping that at the end of our program, you'll actually seek out these films, watch them again, or watch them for the very first time and have a clear understanding and love for some of these films, or hatred, as it may be. So today with me is Sarah Panazzo. I want to welcome her back to the show. She's our special guest for this episode today.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us, Panazzo. And the film that we're doing is, when it originally came out, it was a really popular film, but I don't know how well it stands the test of time because of the subgenre that it's included in, which is the torture porn subgenre, which has now become as infamous and unlikable as the found footage subgenre. That film would be Eli Roth's Hostel. So that's what we're discussing today, and we're going to get into the nitty gritty bitty titty of this movie. So, Panazzo, like I always like to start off with, I want to know exactly what your first impressions of this film when you saw it, whether you saw it at the theater originally or on video. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I was much too young to have seen it in the theater. I don't think I legally was allowed to see it in the theater, but I think I still saw it within like 2 years of it coming out. I remember like renting it on DVD or something. A group of friends, like we all got together and watched it. And it is definitely one of those movies that has stuck with me my entire life. I mean, the whole ending scene with the woman is just iconic. And it's tough to get that out of your head. Like I didn't remember much else from the movie other than her and what happens with her. So rewatching this again, I can't remember the last time I've watched it, but I was like, oh yeah, I forgot all this other stuff happens.
So when I saw this, I'm an old guy, everyone out there. I saw this at the theater when it originally came out, and I actually knew who Eli Roth was, the director of this film. And so I had a lot of anticipation for this film because I absolutely loved Cabin Fever. I was a huge fan of Cabin Fever, and I really wanted to see Hostel. Not only because I actually had no qualms about the torture porn genre or the reasons why people hated it so much. I grew up in the time period where gore wasn't that big of a deal and we would like more of it, but this type of torture in a movie just had not been seen as much except for in extreme Asian films or extreme French films. This time also we had the French extreme film. So this was not, when I first saw this film, it wasn't like this was groundbreaking for me as it might have been for you. That being said, when I saw this, I just thought it was an okay film because there's a lot of setup before what I wanted to watch actually happens.
Right. I forgot, like I said, I forgot it takes like 40 minutes before anything to actually happen. Otherwise, it's like you're watching Euro Trip.
It feels like a found footage film where there's a lot of setup before the payoff at the very end.
Yes.
That being said, when I rewatched the film in order to do the podcast and critique of that, I have a completely different outlook on the film. And this happens to be, 2 decades after it was originally released, almost 2 decades. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of time has passed, and, Eli Roth has become a much more assured filmmaker. He's done some much better films than this. And I actually really enjoyed Hostel 2 more than this film. But visually speaking, there are some really cool things that he does in this film that I just did not recognize in 2005 when the film was originally released, but I do now. That's just to preface my whole thing about this film. So, I have a much higher regards for the film than I did when it was originally released. 20 years can soften your opinions on anything, I guess.
Yeah, and see, like for me, when I saw it the first time, I was like, oh my, like I saw, I think Cannibal Holocaust right around the same time, which is why we watched it. So I remember being like, oh my God, this is horrific. This is awesome. It's blood, it's gore. Oh my gosh. And now rewatching it now, I'm like, oh, this is really tame for
Same.
what was deemed the torture porn era, which I know we're going to get into because I have a lot of notes about that.
So, for those of you who may or may not have seen Hostel, and this plays into the film, which I didn't really take into consideration until I rewatched it. It's two best friends on a Euro trip, and they pick up a third friend, Oli.
Hmm.
They pick him up on one of their cities, and they all three are now traveling throughout Europe, essentially just to get laid. Is essentially the basic plot. But the thing is, and that's how I generally took the film when I first watched it. I took it, oh, it's just three guys out there on a Euro trip trying to get laid. La, 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 la. I want to get to the torture. But the ideal is that the two main characters, Josh and Paxton, are best friends about to go to college. And Josh is trying to get over his true love, his girlfriend, whatever. And the best way to do that in Paxton's mind is to just have sex with a random person. And so
Multiple random people.
multiple random people. And so the film is essentially like, I guess, what would you call it? Medication for someone who had a broken heart in the most extreme way, which goes in with the theme of this is a very extreme thing.
Yes.
Um, so that being the preface, I would like to say that the film does open up with an amazing shot and theme that shows up multiple times in the film, which is it opens up with the location, which is
Czech Republic.
yeah, some place called Slovakia for short.
Mhm.
And in this dungeon or this warehouse of misbegotten torture, they are actually cleaning up this torture chair. Now, it's very important that you're watching this, and it opens because that empty torture chair shows up multiple times in the film, which I never noticed until this last screening. It was like, oh shit, that chair shows up multiple times throughout
Yeah.
the film as like a precursor to what's eventually going to happen to the main characters of this film. And I thought, oh shit, how did I not see this? It's like I when I rewatched it, I started seeing a lot of different visual cues that Eli Roth is doing throughout the
Yeah.
film.
Because
And
it's not even just that chair. Like there's the chairs that they center on in like the hotel lobby and everything over and over and over again. And you're like, what the hell is okay, cool, it's a chair. But then like as you get into the movie, you're like, oh, it's the chair.
it is, and I never picked up on any of this when I originally saw it. I think, 2005, 20 years ago. I just wasn't seeing this film for something like that.
Right. Like we all went into it thinking blood, guts, and gore, but like you said, going back and rewatching it, like there's a lot more. Like besides them going off to college, they keep saying like, well, we want to have a story we can talk about the rest of our lives. And it definitely becomes a story you can talk about the rest of your life based on how long it actually is. Um, but it also hints at later in the film, based on the industries they were going into, that these could possibly become them later on in life of
Mhm.
the guy who's unhappy with his career and his family because there are some like semi-gay undertones with
Oh yeah.
Josh and whether he is gay or not and if that's really what was going on versus Paxton who was going to become a lawyer or whatever and it's like they could easily become any of these people paying to visit here.
Yes, yes. I saw that too. I was like, oh shit. And these are the things I never picked up until I rewatched. I was like, oh shit. They're doing this trip as their means of an extreme sport, but when they get older, the older people who have gone through their whole lives are torturing and killing people as their means of an extreme sport.
Yeah.
I never saw any of that until I rewatched. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, because like and I didn't pick up on a lot of the gay stuff the first time I watched it because like we were watching it and I was like, okay, it's definitely like epitome of the 2000s. It's
Mm-hmm.
super dated. It's very like everybody said like you're gay 24/7 as like a joke or whatever, and people were very homophobic.
Mm-hmm.
And now looking back on it, it's like, oh, like we could have taken it as jokes or whatever, but it is a subline contact subtext for Josh's character that makes a lot of sense.
It is. The first time I remember seeing or hearing about it is when they go to the nightclub. And then, of course, when they get kicked out, ejected, they're making a whole bunch of gay references to the club
Yeah,
being gay, or you have to be gayer. The thing is, Josh is wearing a fanny pack, just like the other person in the club who's
yeah.
not talking to any ladies. And then, of course, I don't remember the name of the character in the train when they first meet him,
I
but
don't even know if they give his name or if he's just like the German businessman, I
he
think
may
is
just be that.
yeah.
But there's kind of those references where you're like saying that there could be these people in the future when they become successful businessmen, and you could actually see or feel that Josh is actually seeing himself in the guy on the train, who then comes back again, and then he feels like he has to apologize when he sees him again, apologize for the way he acted, and
Hmm.
those undertones are throughout the whole movie, and you kind of get, oh wow, this is a very interesting film when you take all this stuff into consideration, especially with the fact that they're going on an extreme Euro trip to go say this out loud, bang as many girls as they can, and of
Yeah.
course the people who are hunting and torturing people are in extreme. I think it's called extreme elite hunting or extreme hunting. I can't remember.
Elite Hunting, I think,
Elite
is the
hunting,
company.
and
Yeah.
they're doing this because they just need to have something that's much more extreme. Like when Paxton at the very end meets the guy who hasn't gone in yet, trying to figure out whether or not he should make the torture slow or fast. It's like, because he needs that adrenaline rush because he's
Yeah.
done everything else. He's banged all the way, he's done all that. And these conversations are much more interesting now when you rewatch the film, because and Paxton can't do anything but stand there and just say, duh.
Yeah, he's just in shock the entire time, but it's so funny because they're all doing what you would naturally expect to feel alive at that age point, I guess. I mean, like, I guess it's a super extreme on the older front, but yeah, like they're all trying to feel alive in some way, shape, or form.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting comparison.
It is. It's also an interesting comparison to the sexes, because I didn't see this until I rewatched it. The two ladies, I wish I remember
Yeah,
them,
I
but
can't remember their names.
become the Josh Paxton and Ollie's roommates, where they don't think they would be in a co-ed hostel, who are manipulating them the entire time. And then when it's revealed, when the one lady drops Paxton off, Paxton thinks he's going to go meet his friends, and she flat out says he is her bitch at that time, because
Yeah.
she's been manipulating him the entire time, whereas Josh and Paxton have been thinking that they've been doing whatever they can with the female sex throughout the whole thing, and without any regards to them at all, and without any repercussions of what they do. And this is like an extreme repercussion, because these women are the ones who are really manipulating these gullible gullible and vain men into becoming victims of even more vain men as they're older. Like, you don't see the
Yeah.
young people torturing other
No.
young people. You are seeing older business people doing this.
Well, and it's weird because they are led into this almost from the beginning when they accidentally meet Alexi, the
Lexia.
guy in the apartment who lets them in once the hostel is closed. And it's like by sheer happenstance they miss their curfew
Mm-hmm.
and they end up on this from countries away, mind you, to then get this. Like these people are being semi-hunted down before they even get there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting in that front too, of like kind of like a human trafficking-esque thing. Like they're literally on the train there, and the guy is figuring out that this is the guy he wants. He wants Josh. So it starts really early without you even realizing it.
Yeah, which is interesting because, like you just said, it's happenstance. We don't realize that Alexi, or I think it's Alexi,
I think
is
so.
in on it to the very, very, very end. You just think this is all, oh, it's just. And the thing is, Alexi has this cell phone with him and all these girls in it, naked girls, and that's what entices the three men to go there.
Hmm.
Uh, which is really, extra, but it's also there. He's manipulating them to leaving their trip to going to somewhere that they have no clue about. And
Yes.
Josh is saying, "Oh, this is not even on a map. It doesn't matter. You go there, you'll have lots of fun."
Yeah, and he's like, nobody else is there, and it's like, well, I wonder why. And speaking of which, I know Eli Roth and the makers of the movie all like were very put down by the actual countries that were mentioned um because of it. Where was it? Yeah, Slovakia and Czech Republic were disgusted and outraged, and they actually offered to fly Roth out there on their dime to show him what it actually was like there. And Roth was like, I wasn't meaning to be offensive. It's really about how Americans don't even know that these countries exist. And it
Mm-hmm.
aims to show Americans' ignorance of the world around them. And then he started arguing that people still go to Texas even though there's a chainsaw massacre. So you can't take too much offense by us calling out your country in the movie, um, which I thought was just a fun tidbit. But yeah, I mean, tr this could literally happen anywhere. It could have happened in the United States if we wanted to. It just makes it more fun that it's like a backpacking Europe trip.
Yeah, and the fact that the people who are torturing get charged more for Americans is like astronomically more than everyone else.
I think that was probably like there's a lot of blood, guts, and disgusting stuff, and it's like it's creepy, it's scary, but the scariest part is that, oh no, I'm paying to be here is just probably the worst part. Like I was while rewatching it, I was even like, man, there's probably like the guy cleaning out the cells with the hose
Yeah.
is also probably paying to be there.
Oh,
Because it's like a whole thing for people. So like I wouldn't be surprised.
well, getting back to something I don't want to forget about. I like the fact that there's that little kids gang, which is has their payment is usually in candy and bubblegum.
Bubblegum, the
Um,
bubblegum gang.
that was the bubblegum game is awesome. Essentially, these younger kids who have been left to their own devices in Slovakia, who have no grown up parental guidance whatsoever, have all banded together to do their own thing, and it doesn't. It you realize that the people in Slovakia, the grown ups who are doing this whole torture thing, have no say in what these kids do when the kids are manipulated at the very end with
Hmm.
a bag of candy and they beat up the so-called, I don't even know what to call these guys, the torture
Yeah.
people. I thought because you could think that these kids would just be another element that the torture people
Yeah,
paid off
absolutely.
into that scene there. And I was like, dude, they take nothing from any grown-ups whatsoever. That's where the youth of this whole culture has rotted to the fact that these kids are eating the main thing that will rot their teeth out. And that's their payment.
Yeah, I think it's funny that they bring him back for the second movie essentially because that's some of my favorite bits is them playing soccer. But no, it was funny because they actually like found these kids on the street while they were filming there, and they were like, "Hey, we're going to hire you guys to be in this movie. If you don't fuck with us and like steal our shit, we're gonna give you like money." So there was a lot of that. I don't know if you have the DVD, but I watched the behind the scenes called Hostel Dissected, and it's so funny just them hanging with the kids. And it's just bizarre.
Oh, I bet. Does it say where this was filmed? Was this filmed?
It was in Czech Republic. I had written down somewhere exactly where it was, but I cannot find it right now. But yeah, it was in the Czech Republic, all of it. And it was between like different mental hospitals, abandoned hospitals, stuff like that. And then some stage work.
Well, I say that because the cinematography and the way they use the streets in the city is actually really interesting, especially at the end when they're trying to, or Paxton and one Asian lady are trying to escape. I think she's Japanese, but I forgot.
Yeah, I think she's supposed to be Japanese. But yeah, it that's why I really liked the behind the scenes featurette because they actually showed that they filmed all three shots like at the same time while they were doing the whole ending car chase thing in the city at the same time as the red district at the beginning.
Hmm.
And all of the other like walking through town bits. It was literally all the same town within walk and within blocks of each other.
Oh, okay.
So I can it's on YouTube too. I watched it as a two-parter. I highly recommend it because it is a lot of fun. Uh the crew seems like they're a lot of fun. That seems like they had a lot of fun with what they had for this. Like they hired a string quartet to play in between shots to lighten up the mood in the building.
Oh, Jesus.
So it's really funny. But yeah, I mean it's like the cute little perfect town except the whole town is also in on it almost.
Hmm.
Or it seems that way because you get so many dirty looks. And like you said
Yes.
with the kids, you don't know if they're in on it or they're not. The cops are in on it that you find out. The local like women are in on it. So it's like how far does this actually go?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Oh, which brings up another interesting thing that I noticed this time around, and I don't think I noticed before. And this is kind of a precursor to the ending, of course, because when Josh and Paxton, I think, start to follow the guy they think is Ali because he's wearing his
Hmm.
coat. They follow him into a torture. What is it called?
The
Um,
torture museum.
Torture Museum. Thank you. The Torture Museum, and of course, they eventually become tortured themselves. So it's interesting that what they see in there, and they see that empty chair again in
Yeah.
the Torture Museum.
Well, and like there's the guy who scares him who's like dressed as like the executioner, and he's literally wearing the same exact colors as the like leather smocks that they wear at the thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, just the ticket taker where he's got like the ticket and it's like a little tiny guillotine just chopping the head off the tickets. I was like, this is perfect. I love this.
Yeah, yeah. The little things like this I never noticed 20 years ago because, like I said, I only ever saw the movie twice. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
and
and
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, I was like, I only ever seen this movie twice, so it's not like one of those films that I was begging me to rewatch it. And I've seen all three of the Hostel movies.
Yeah.
It only had something to do with the first two. Um,
Well, and like I said before, like I remember it being a lot more grotesque. And this time while watching it, I was like, okay, everybody's done the Achilles heel shot, which is still disgusting. There's other gross bits, but the forced perspective that they did and the clever cutting that they did,
mhm.
like when they're trying to briefly show what's happening before all of the guys get taken, where they're gonna like chop off the one woman's toe with the bolt cutters,
Mhm.
and instead they quick swap over to somebody using toenail clippers. I was like,
Yeah.
this is genius. And then like I said, you've got the whole thing with the chainsaw, and it's like man, it looks really good. Like you can tell, like looking from a film perspective, that it is forced perspective, but it looks really well done. The guts, the gore. I mean, it is Greg Nicotero who
Yeah.
was in charge of like makeup of NFX. So like of course it's wonderful, but like it's it wasn't as bad as I remember because we've gotten so over the top with stuff like Terrifier and stuff like that. Like it's no longer shocking like it was for the time, but not anymore.
Yeah, and you're right. It was a hell of. I mean, this was at the post one of the poster childs for the torture porn uh image.
It was actually what the first one ever was called torture porn.
Yeah, because this came after Saul. Saul wasn't really considered that until like the sequels, I believe.
Yeah, so this one, David Edelstein possibly coined the term in 2006, and he called this torture porn in his article. I actually found a link and read it. And then they went back, and a lot of people started labeling things as torture porn
Mm-hmm.
before that. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting that this let it off, but really it's existed the whole time between like splatter films and everything else. But yeah, like the 2000s, they said like particularly 2003 to 2009 was the torture porn era.
Oh, it
And we
lasted that long, huh?
yeah. Well, they said that it kind of died off because of everybody going to do remakes of original like splatter films.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't last very long, but I mean, the elements of it still exist. Like I said in Terrifier, I mean, I think I have a whole thing of like a Venn diagram of how they all intersect between extreme cinema, like you said, the extreme French films, how it originally started with like extreme Asian films,
Mhm.
and then how it became like splatter versus Gorno versus torture porn versus splatstick. And it's just very interesting how it's like the term for it just kind of disappeared, but it still exists. Because like extreme horror, it would technically be what it is now, and that's where you get like the Substance Infinity Pool. People even put on like Natural Born Killers, Passion of the Christ. And it's like it's such a bizarro list of what you would consider extreme cinema because it spans all genres.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, it disappeared, but in name only because it still exists, obviously.
Well, I'm sure that that moniker used to help sell certain horror films,
Oh, it
where
yes.
now people look down upon it when you say it.
Well, they looked down upon it then too, because they were like, this is disgusting. It's like porn. People are getting off on this. Because that was like the big thing for me being in like high school at the time, is everybody was like, oh no, you guys are, it's just like a version of porn to you guys. And it's like, no, it's like almost an art form back then. And that's how it started off as, was an art form for theatrical stuff. And back in like 1906, I think was like the first labeled or written down version that they had history of. But it's, I mean, like I said, especially with Terrifier, that's like the biggest, bloodiest thing we see nowadays. And nobody's going around calling it torture porn anymore. It's just like extreme blood and gore.
Someone will come up with a new if the Terrifier 3 thing hits on something,
Oh,
they'll
yeah.
make more. Well, in theory, it kind of is. You have the, what was it, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, which is just as disturbingly graphic and gory as that is.
Yeah.
And they have multiple spin-offs and sequels in the works. So uh, I don't see it like going anywhere anytime soon.
Well, and that's why, like I said, like I feel like the title of torture porn has disappeared, but it has become more normalized in horror itself. So we don't really call it that anymore because nothing is shock and awe. I mean, like we're not going as far back as like Serbian film and stuff like that, where it gets like really, really nasty. But like you get some of the over the top splatterific everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, like I said, going back and watching this, like I wasn't as disturbed because I was like, oh, this is in every movie now. Like this was the leader, but it is now nothing new. And going back and watching it, it's like, oh, this is it.
Well, also keep in mind that that was actually part of the plot of the movie.
Yes.
So it's much more readily there. It's kind of like watching Captivity, which I don't think anyone remembers that movie, but that's essentially a torture movie as well, but less
Hmm.
graphic. If you were going to do a more PG 13/R version of a torture porn, you had Captivity. Uh, but like you said, I see this a lot of gore and extreme gore and extreme special
Hmm.
practical effects, mind you,
Yeah.
which is being done a lot in the last couple of years. And Terrifier is the leader of that because it's becoming now normalized
Yeah.
to general audiences. Like Terrifier 3, like we discussed, was the #1 movie of the weekend.
Hmm.
And it's not rated, which is has that has never been heard of. And most of those non-rated movies kind of stick to the art house uh, places. But this was enough of a general audience success that it would became #1 movie. And when that happens, you kind of think, well, this extreme gore film either is out there for shock value, but not really because people already see like the first two Terrifiers.
Yeah. So like I actually found the way that they decided what is considered torture porn. So it's the combination of splatter and slasher. And the difference between it and earlier splatter is that it is often mainstream, wide release with high production value.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so that makes a lot of sense because you did have like the splatter films. I mean, hell, it started all the way back in like 1908, originates French Grand Guignol Theater, where they
Oh,
did realistic
Frank
scenes of,
Renault. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, they did realistic scenes of blood and carnage on stage, and that was in 1908 was the first appearance in England. And then the first film was in 1916, where they showed two on-screen decapitations, reintroduced in 1950s with Psycho and Hammer films, and then we got into all of just the regular 60, 70, 80s like splatter slasher movies. So
Yeah.
it's like we get the new verbiage of it every couple decades, but it's always the same thing. It's just gotten more and more, and they find a new way to shock us, and then it kind of goes back, and everyone's like, "Oh, I'm used to this again. What are they going to do new?"
Well, the '60s into the '70s, you had HG. I don't want to say HG Wells. The guy,
Nope, not that one.
yeah. If for some reason, Herschel Gordon, Herschel Gordon and his films, which were extreme back then, and then of course in the '70s you had the Italians trying to make everything more extreme,
Right.
and it kind of died out in the '80s where we had the slasher boom and everyone trying to be more PC with their mainstream. They cut out all the gore, and then the '90s, the less spoke about the '90s, the better. And then the 2000s, we get the revisionist type of stuff, and you get a little bit from the French horror starting in there.
Hmm.
The Japanese horror never went anywhere. They had this whole
Yeah.
extreme subgenre of films that have always existed, but never kind of crossed countries to the US yet.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, they're slowly getting there because
yeah,
I remember like Audition and Ichi the Killer, and then we got like what was it, Old Boy?
Old Boy, and
Where like we saw that, and then it was like they did the US attempt at a remake, which was really just not great, but like we started getting into it, and so now it's more here than it was, like it's more known now than it was
yeah,
back then, which I really appreciate because it is fantastic.
yeah. Well, that's because audiences nowadays are not afraid of foreign films and subtitles. So
Hmm.
you're getting all those films that we had access to, but no one was watching them because they were subtitled, and no one was dubbing those movies. Like you can dub a Jackie Chan movie, but no one's dubbing the extreme Japanese horror films back in the
No.
day. You know. And then we get to Eli Roth, who's influenced by these filmmakers, and
Yes.
not only in Hostel, but even in the extreme horror that he's depicted in Cabin Fever, which that was his low budget debut film that did more money than it probably ever should have, but it Eli Roth became known as that whole guy who did these type of films.
Well, and it wasn't just him because we've talked about this before, but the Splat Pack in general
Yeah.
ends up being that whole like 2000s gore fest. And you get so many good films, so many good directors that are really big, even still now, who are still making things. And it was just like one hit after another. And I appreciate that they all kind of branched out to do some other things, but I love when Eli Roth comes back to horror and does like Thanksgiving in full.
Come on, you
Because
like
it's,
Borderlands?
don't even talk to me about that. But no, like Thanksgiving, fantastic. Green Inferno, great. All of the Hostel stuff, Grindhouse, Cabin Fever. I mean, it's fantastic. It's funny. It's gory. I love seeing him as an actor and other things. But yeah, everybody who's kind of surrounding that too ends up being around the same thing. It's all that like super gory, slight comedic undertones. It's just it is the 2000s.
Well, I
It's
think
everything I remember about it.
I think why Hustle also works for mainstream audiences is it does have a sense of humor to it.
Yes.
When Paxton's two fingers get chopped off by the chainsaw and he's trying to save his two fingers, but then they we
Or
all
the
know.
hand falls off and stops the cart from rolling and you can't move it and you're
Yeah,
like, what is. And then the whole scene with the Eli Roth's buddy, who was the US guy killing
yeah.
people, who's just like trying to like, do you go fast? Do you go slow? Did you enjoy yourself?
Those type of moments makes the whole extreme nature of what's going on in the story a little bit lighter. You could have gone
Yes.
completely extreme. This could have been something as dark as Martyrs or
Yes.
Gills. but that but this isn't trying to be like one of the French extreme horrors. This is,
No.
we have, Eli Roth has taken these aesthetics and made them more mainstream and more Americanized, because these are two Americans going through here.
Yeah.
Although Paxton at one point tries to convince the guys that he's not an American, which is quite funny. I didn't notice that until I rewatched it, just so they don't torture him because he paid for an American to torture. I did find that hilarious. Stuff like that I found funny this time around. So.
Yeah, I mean, and the absurdity of the ending, like the woman sees her reflection in the sign at the bus stop, and then she just like yeets herself in front of a very fast moving train that's coming through a station.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, is this train supposed to be stopping? But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
visual.
yeah, and I mean, like nowadays, if this movie would have come out, you would have gotten the entire revenge side of it, where she would have like done the Kill Bill eye patch and hunted him down and like caused her own version of torture.
Yep.
But yeah, it has some very absurdist comedy in it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All right. But one of the things I did notice this time around that I never noticed is when he's the train guy. I don't know what we're going to call this train guy that keeps popping up. He has a conversation with Josh. Then he kills Josh, and of course Paxton meets him at the very end, and kind of does all the torture that is done to Josh and him to that guy. He cuts off his fingers. Then he slices his throat just like the train guy slices Josh's throat.
Yeah, he
I
like
never know.
swirlies him to death, and I thought he was gonna take his fingers and like replace his own as a reminder, and I was like, well, we're not going that metal. But actually, the original director's cut ending, did you watch the director's cut or did you watch the theatrical release?
I just have a theatrical release version because it's old.
Same. So, the director's cut alternate ending is that the guy on the train actually has his daughter with him, the like 4-year-old, 5-year-old he shows from his wallet. And it ends with Paxton kidnapping the daughter and leaving the businessman alive so that it hints at like he will then go and torture his loved ones as
And
payback and revenge. And it's like, I don't want. They show a little clip after of them filming it, and the guy who played Paxton was like, I feel so gross right now. And he's just like walking away. He's like, I can't, nope, never doing that one again.
that's weird. Yeah. Jay Hernandez, who went on to do
Yes.
much, who went on to do much better films than had a television show, but I can't remember what he is. But he's done some
He's
stuff.
done quite a bit.
um, well, he doesn't survive much longer in Hostel 2, but
No.
the homage to, I guess, Friday 13th Part 2, when Jason out of nowhere just kills the survivor for the first one. It's like, you left Crystal Lake, Jason? What the hell? But
Yeah.
those type of things, and I believe when I rewatched it, that was the first reference I got, so that Eli Roth is making a reference to that. That didn't make any sense to me for Friday 13th, and it didn't make any sense to Hostel too.
Well, and Hostel 2 is just like a fever dream that's so much fun. I mean,
It
my
is.
favorite shot is the ending with the soccer goal with the head. And I'm like, of course this is how we end this movie.
Yeah, I love Hostel too, and that's
It's so
probably
good.
why I did not remember this first film until I rewatched it, because I watched the second one and just enjoyed that story a whole lot more. I thought that was much more.
Hmm.
Um, that being said, I want to make sure I get all my notes out. Is there something you also would like to get out in regards to this? Because I want to make sure I get everything with Hostel out.
No, I think I got most of it going into like extreme cinema, the history of like torture porn and how it's here but it's not here. Um, but yeah, I highly recommend watching the Hostel Dissected because it is so much fun. One of the notes I did have from that is that the set designer starts everything in Amsterdam very bright and vibrant
Mm-hmm.
with multiple colors and everything. And then as they move to Slovakia, it drains all color from life due to the torture, so that the only color you then see is the color of blood.
Mm.
And I was like, that's something I did not pick up on watching the film, but it makes a whole lot more sense.
I didn't pick up on it at the very beginning in Amsterdam, but I did pick up on the very gray and brown colors for
Yeah,
the Slovakia thing. Huh,
yeah.
and this is and I remember this being successful. I don't remember how successful.
Yeah, it the budget was 4.8 million and it made 82 million worldwide.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was expecting this damn movie to be as successful as it was, and it became and it was one of those films that then of course torture porn became popular for the 6 years it was popular.
Yeah.
But I was glad to see Eli Roth move on to lots of different movies because that doesn't happen to a lot of film directors who start off with their film career with Cabin Fever.
Yeah, he's got such a wide genre, like the kids' movies too, like The House with the Clock in its walls. Like,
Yeah, but I actually enjoyed that one. I did. The thing is, I see him trying to branch out, but he does still produce a lot of horror films.
yes,
Um, I think it's called Aftershock, which I thought was really good that he produced.
yes.
I feel that doing a Cabin Fever remake was the worst decision he ever made. But Hostel is still something that I guess holds some type of deep meaning to him because I think I read that they were trying to do a Hostel TV series now.
Yeah, apparently it's like in the works. I don't know where in the process because they couldn't find too much. But I mean, like, as long as it's done well, I can see it doing well. Because, like I said, it's still relevant today with everything else and the gore and guts of all the fun stuff. And you can think about all the new up and comers who want to get into special effects having their fun. But yeah, I mean, it can go one way or another. It can go really badly, like cabin fever, or it can go pretty well.
I'm kind of thinking that what's old is new again, and
Hmm.
a lot of that stuff is now being adapted to television, as we've seen with like the Exorcist TV show, the Damien TV show, even Chucky TV show. Hell,
Yeah.
was it Ash versus Evil Dead
Evil
TV?
Dead. Well, now we're
Everything.
getting the Camp Crystal Lake TV
Okay,
show and
okay.
the Michael TV show, and now we're getting Welcome to Derry. And
Yes.
some of them I'm excited for, but yeah, we are in that cyclical pattern of we are officially at remake decade again.
Yeah, but it's remakes as television shows.
I know, which I can generally like more because you have more time with it.
Oh, I don't know. How much time do you want to spend in the torture chamber? Come on.
Yeah, it depends on what end of the torture chamber you're on. Are you the torturer or the victim, Kevin?
Oh my God. I don't know if you watch Hostel 2, you become both. He becomes both by the end of that movie. That being said, there's something we wanted to start, or some of the other guys and ladies on the show want to start this. They want to rate the movie between 1 being very poor star and 5 being very excellent movie. How would you rate this today?
Today, I would probably rate it a 4 because it is a strong story. It's got really good visuals. It's done really well. Compared to some of the other stuff we see where we're like the script hasn't held up, it's more of a cult film. This actually holds up to like today. Like you can watch it today and be like, oh, it still looks as good as when it originally came out. It doesn't look super cheesy, except for certain scenes. But yeah, I mean it still holds up really well.
Mm. I will agree with you on that. I would actually give it 4 more so now than I would have given it when it originally came out, because of the rewatch. I think the way that the whole thing about ageism and the sexist overtones between male and female, and also like the gay overtones. I did not when I originally watched this. It was all throwaway to me.
Yeah.
When you rewatch it after you spend some time with the movie, it allows you to see some of the deeper meaning in the movie. I do like the ideal that, and I only have this now, that the main characters are essentially the younger version of what they could become when
Hmm.
they become torturers in their old age, dissatisfied with their lives. That adds a new element to the film that I had never, ever, ever even thought of, and it allows me to enjoy the film a little bit more.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's not me watching a bunch of people get tortured for the hell.
Yes.
And that's why I say with you, I think it does stand the test of time, even though you have uh, those gay remarks in here. I think it works for the Paxton character, not
Hmm.
Paxton, but the Josh character a lot. So someone who doesn't know himself. Uh,
Yes.
those all work for me. They don't seem dated to me anymore. I could have watched this and taken this movie a completely different way, but I think after our discussion, I think it's worth giving it 4 stars. I think it's a film that a lot of people out there who may have dismissed this film can go out there now and see it with a different lens. Maybe enjoy it, maybe not, because torture porn may not be their thing.
You can definitely stop at like the 40-minute mark and get most of the film and then like cut straight to the last 10 minutes. And I think you've got most of the movie.
Yes, but I like to say that, to be honest with you, this is not any of the more extreme stuff out there. I think
No.
this is completely tame considering some
Yes.
of the stuff that was out there in the 2000s and even today.
Yeah.
With that, everyone, I want to thank you so much for joining us for Conversations in Horror. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Panazzo, about the film Hostel from director Eli Roth. If you're out there and you enjoyed this episode, make sure to check out some of our previous episodes. The show is available on all of your favorite podcast apps. It's also available on Spotify and YouTube. So please check us out. Make sure to follow us for future episodes. And with that, everyone out there, have a pleasant day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.